Hey guys, tonight we're going to dive deep into a story that official history books have intentionally forgotten. Do you believe we've been deceived by history? About that great woman, Queen Elizabeth I, the one who steered England through storms and built an empire that books praise as the Golden Age? Behind that magnificent curtain lies a terrifying secret no one dares to tell. The pristine white mask and lavish gowns merely concealed a horrifying truth. A life of unimaginable filth. Official historical accounts have overlooked this, but I'm about to reveal 5 shocking secrets about Elizabeth I's hygiene, so repulsive that once you hear them, you'll never be able to look at royal portraits the same way again. The 5th fact will astound you. It was so horrific that foreign ambassadors had to document it in their official reports. We're talking about a queen who was slowly rotting away on her own throne. But before we get into the details, you need to understand something crucial. Her hygiene habits weren't just a matter of sloppiness, they were a strategic weapon. A meticulously calculated decision that helped her hold power for nearly half a century. And when you hear these truths, you'll realize that the golden age you once knew was built on a foundation of filth. Are you ready? Let's begin. The first secret will make you shudder. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Please comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Shocking hygiene, secret number 1. The sugar addiction, death begins with sweetness. Close your eyes, breathe gently, and let your thoughts drift back to the 16th century, where dawn in Tudor palaces was awakened not by birdsong but by the sweet scent of sugar, an indulgence more precious than gold. In that hushed world, Queen Elizabeth I nurtured a terrifying addiction, so potent that even the most powerful woman in Europe could not resist its lethal sweetness. Imagine a royal breakfast. Instead of crisp bread with fruit preserves, Elizabeth delicately savoured each candied violet petal, glazed in pure white sugar like precious gems scattered on a porcelain plate. Lunchtime was no simple soup or stew, but meticulously sculpted marzipan figures, animals and flowers drenched in thick syrup. By dinner, courtiers' eyes widened at a platter of ruby-red grapefruit coated in a glistening syrup, droplets of sugar falling like tiny pearls. And the most horrifying part? You might think sugar merely rots teeth, but for Elizabeth it became a cleaning tool. Each morning, while her eyes still blurred from a short night's sleep, she mixed sugar with herbs, ground it into a paste, and vigorously rubbed it over her gums and teeth. That sticky mixture, tinting her lips a bright rose, was in fact silently eroding her enamel, turning once gleaming teeth into blackened, decayed remnants. This grim practice carried forward into the late 1590s, when foreign ambassadors meticulously recorded, "Her Majesty's teeth are as black as coal and broken," leaving gaps through which her breath issues so foul that we are forced to step back several paces to converse. Her speech, once fluid and melodic, grew awkward and distorted, robbed of clarity by the countless teeth she had lost. Yet the terror did not end there. Within the Grand Palace, the most dreadful spectacle was watching duchesses and noble ladies vie to blacken their own teeth with soot and charcoal. They believed that a jet-black smile was the new emblem of wealth and power, slavishly imitating the Queen's horrifying habit to assert their status. They lined up in the royal dressing chamber, smearing soot across their teeth, until the pearly white grins of old became the height of fashion. That sweetness, once a symbol of opulence, had transformed into the royal family's mortal enemy, an invisible weapon attacking the Queen's own prestige. She used sugar not only for indulgence, but also under the illusion of maintaining oral hygiene, an aspiration wildly coveted by the wealthy elite of her day. The result was that her addiction shattered her powerful image, exacting a daily toll on her body. And when night falls, let the hazy beauty of this tale lull you like a gentle breeze, yet retain the vivid, painful image of those decayed teeth. Because this is only the beginning of our journey through 5 horrifying hygiene secrets, where cleanliness is more than mere washing and becomes fertile ground for the darkest of practices. Prepare yourself for the next chapter, where the fear of water will startle you even more. Shocking hygiene secret number 2. The fear of water and the grisly morning ritual. Imagine, if you will, waking in the dim half-light of a Tudor chamber, heavy velvet drapes muffling the first chill of dawn. You may have heard the quip, "I bathe once a month, whether I need it or not." Whether Queen Elizabeth I actually spoke those words is beside the point, for the sentiment captures perfectly the horrifying reality of 16th century hygiene. Yet Elizabeth did not avoid water out of mere laziness. She avoided it because she was afraid. Afraid of death. In that era, people believed water, even the cleanest water, could open the pores and allow deadly miasmas, poisonous airs thought to carry plague, to penetrate the body. Bathing was considered as dangerous as drinking poison. As a result, Queen Elizabeth could go months without touching soap or fresh water. Instead, each morning her waiting attendants performed a ritual so revolting it would make any modern person shudder. Long before the sun crept above the castle battlements, her gentlewomen would strip off the linen shifts she had worn for days, sometimes weeks. These undergarments, saturated with sweat, dead skin, and bodily fluids, were believed to have drawn out toxins from her flesh. No washing was necessary, for the mere act of peeling off the cloth sufficed. A fresh shift, crisp and unsoiled, was then fitted in its place. Once unclothed, Elizabeth would recline on a bench, imperious yet trembling, as terrified attendants applied a few drops of rosewater, mixed with vinegar to a soft cloth. They dabbed gently only where she permitted on her arms, neck, and torso. There was no scrubbing, no lathering, no soap. The scented water merely smeared thinly across accumulated grime, leaving a ghost of fragrance but little real cleanliness. Picture the scene. 6 pale faces enclosed around the reclining queen, each attendant's breath caught between fear of displeasing their sovereign and revulsion at the task. One false move, one accidental stain upon her pristine gown, and the ritual would be repeated, prolonging the ordeal. All the while, Elizabeth lay still, her white makeup intact, her alabaster mask unblemished by anything but the faintest trace of vinegar. And the practicalities, the impracticalities of an honest-to-goodness bath were staggering. The palaces of England possessed no running water, no plumbing to speak of. To prepare a proper bath required hauling dozens of heavy pails of water from the nearest well or cistern, hauling them to a hearth, and keeping fires stoked until every bucket was boiling hot. A wooden tub, far too small for any actual ablution, had to be rolled on a crude carriage into the Queen's chamber. Then at least half a dozen servants, perhaps more, would assist, balancing steaming buckets, supporting the frail body, and swabbing the tub between uses. The logistics resembled a military campaign more than a domestic chore. Officers to organize the labor, pages to shuttle implements, and stewards to seal off corridors so that curious eyes could not witness the spectacle. The entire operation could consume the better part of a day, from dawn until the candles guttered low, and by its end the water would have cooled, the fires banked, and the Queen, still stained by sweat and dust, would be dressed once more in her weighted gown. For Elizabeth, this ordeal was a necessary evil if she dared risk washing away the layers of lead-based makeup that concealed her true visage. The slightest smear of water could dissolve the Venetian ceruse, caking her skin, exposing the ravaged flesh beneath. Thus, she chose ritual humiliation and superficial cleaning over the far greater humiliation of seeing her real face. In those fabled halls, they said that no matter how many times she dabbed rose water on her arms and neck, an underlying stench persisted, an odor that even the sweetest perfume could not fully mask. Visitors who encountered the Queen in council chambers later described a faint but constant whiff of vinegar and decay clinging to her cloak, a reminder that water, more than any threat of plague, was her greatest terror. So, as you drift into languid reverie, let the memory of this morning ritual, the stripping of soiled shifts, the timid dabs of scented vinegar, the immense effort to stage a true bath wash over you, like a half-remembered dream. You have now witnessed shocking Hygiene's secret number 2, the Queen's dread of water and the grisly performance she endured each dawn. Rest now, for the next secret will reveal darkness even deeper than this fear. Shocking Hygiene's secret number 3, the mask of death, the killer makeup. Imagine drifting in and out of sleep in a candlelit chamber, where every breath carries the faint scent of wax and oil. You may recall the pristine portraits of Queen Elizabeth I, her face a flawless, porcelain white mask as smooth as a doll's. Yet the truth? That mask was a killer. For more than 40 years, Elizabeth anointed herself each morning with a paste called Venetian ceruse, a potent blend of vinegar and white lead. With languid precision, she would sweep that toxic concoction across her face, neck and hands, transforming her skin into an unearthly canvas. Each brushstroke lay down a layer of poison, inch by inch, trapping her in a cycle of self-inflicted decay. Lead, you see, is a silent assassin. It seeps into the pores, travels to the brain, and leads to organ failure, neurological damage, and eventual death. But Elizabeth refused to relent. When rashes and sores erupted from the lead's corrosive bite, she simply piled on more makeup, caking it thicker to conceal the damage. Year after year, layer after layer, her skin hardened beneath the crust, cracking like aged plaster. Foreign ambassadors, upon viewing her, murmured that she looked more like a painted portrait than a living woman. Yet the horror did not end there. Her lips, painted with bright crimson made from mercury, shimmered with a deadly gleam. Mercury, that ever-poisonous dust, brought tremors to her hands, robbed her memory, and twisted her emotions into wild swings. Over time, it threatened her very mind, inching her closer to madness. In her dread of revealing the ravaged truth, Elizabeth forbade any artist from painting her true likeness. Painters were compelled to reproduce earlier, untouched images of her youth, so that she might remain eternally radiant in the eyes of her subjects. Mirrors were banished from her private chambers, for fear she might glimpse the ravages beneath her painted facade. As the years passed and the gloss of her early reign slowly dimmed, her makeup grew so delicate that the slightest touch would flake it away, exposing patches of raw, ulcerated flesh beneath. A dedicated team of attendants stood by, ready to dust her fragile mask with fresh powder, always in secret, always in silence, ensuring that no courtiers ever witnessed the ghastly reality. Envision that scene as the sun sets. A hush falls over the palace, and in the quiet gloom, the queen reclines on a velvet chaise. A pale hand reaches up, grazing her cheek, and a small fragment of white lead crumbles away. Below lies the true face of power, scarred, pockmarked, and scarlet with sores. Then, a soft rustle as a chambermaid leans close, applying new powder in the dim light, restoring the illusion before dawn. Elizabeth did not merely hide her age. She hid her very self from the world's gaze. Every brushstroke of lethal ceruse was a stroke of defiance, an act to preserve her image, her authority, and her control over perception. Yet each day, as the poison seeped deeper, she inched closer to the brink of self-destruction, all for the sake of beauty and power. So, allow this vision to drift through your mind like a half-remembered dream. The queen's face, so impossibly fair, yet crafted from the most deadly of substances. Shocking hygiene secret number 3 has revealed the mask of death, the makeup that murdered her from the outside in. Rest now, for the darkest secrets are yet to come. Shocking hygiene secret number 4, the horrific odor and inner decay. Imagine, if you will, the rustle of silk gowns and the faint scent of lavender drifting through a grand Tudor corridor. Beneath those sumptuous layers, and within those perfumed gloves and handkerchiefs, lay a body unraveling from the inside out. Elizabeth was a corpse in life, and she knew it. To stave off the revolting stench, she carried small ornate spheres known as pomanders, each filled with exotic herbs and fragrant resins. At the first hint of a foul whiff, even her own, she would lift one to her nose and inhale deeply, as though she could breathe in freshness and ward off the creeping decay of her flesh. Yet the reality was far darker. Under that mask of scent, her body was rotting, hour by hour. Her clothes were soaked in the richest perfumes of the age. Gloves were steeped in scented oils. Handkerchiefs were perpetually damp with rosewater. Elizabeth moved through her court like a living perfume factory, winding trails of fragrance in her wake. Each layer of scent was a desperate barrier against an odor that no amount of flowers or spices could fully conceal. And there was more. Prolonged poisoning from lead-based makeup and mercurial lip stains had ravaged her hair, causing it to fall out in clumps. Where once a crown of auburn curls had framed her face, now only patchy wisps remained. She attempted to stiffen the remaining strands with a mixture of sugar, water, and beaten egg whites, then dusted them with powder to mask the thinning. When that proved insufficient, she donned towering wigs of vibrant red, erecting a synthetic forest above her scalp to obscure the truth. Within the hushed inner circles of the palace, courtiers whispered in hushed tones. Her skin was ulcerated, flaking, and in pockets literally rotting while she still drew breath. Those close to her recounted glimpses of blotchy patches and open sores, hidden only by thick scarves and heavy sleeves. It was said that Elizabeth carried a scented walking stick, not as support but to hold at arm's length, when passing courtiers whose own odours mingled with hers in a miasma of human decay. The cruelest irony of all was that the woman who smelled the worst in England was also the one most sensitive to foul scents. Her reliance on pomanders and oils was born not of vanity but of terror, a horror of her own body betraying her each day. In her paranoia, she forbade anyone from seeing her without makeup, fearing that a single glance might expose the living rot concealed beneath layers of perfume and powder. A small cadre of specialized attendants was assigned to Elizabeth's personal care. Their sole duty was to reapply fragrance and powder to her shoulders and hands, those areas where the ravages of poison had left the most visible damage. They worked in silent, dimly lit chambers, stepping lightly so as not to disturb the illusion of perfection she maintained for her subjects. None could speak of what they had seen, for the Queen's wrath was as formidable as her power. Picture the scene as dusk falls. A lone torch flickers at the entrance to a private room. Within, Elizabeth sits motionless on a velvet chair, her skin a haunting canvas of cracked white powder. An attendant approaches with a soft brush, careful to avoid the tender, exposed flesh beneath. With each stroke, a fresh layer of powder is applied, sealing away the stench and the sight of decay. Then, as silently as she arrived, the attendant slips away, leaving the Queen alone with her secret. In that moment, the body that had once embodied regal grandeur is reduced to a prison of infection and rot a ghastly tomb in which every breath is tinged with death. Yet Elizabeth would emerge at dawn, clad in silks and perfumed to the hilt, her visage immaculate, her presence commanding. To her people, she appeared transcendent and untouchable, even as her true self crumbled within. Thus, shocking hygiene secret number 4 reveals a chilling truth. Behind the mask of scent and the fortress of perfume lay a living cadaver, succumbing day by day to internal decay. As you drift into the quiet hush of sleep, let this image linger. The Queen of England, trapped in her own body's betrayal, hidden by fragrance and fear, a testament to the darkest extremes of royal vanity. Rest now, for the final secret awaits one so revolting it will truly haunt your dreams. Shocking hygiene secret number 5. The throne of filth, human waste, and the royal exodus. Imagine, as the pale moonlight filters through towering windows of a Tudor palace, that the grand corridors beneath your feet conceal a network of decay and clamorous labour. Beyond the silk draperies, silver chandeliers, and echoing laughter of courtiers lies a scene so revolting it would shatter any illusion of regal splendour. Elizabeth's personal toilet, known as the close stool, was a finely carved wooden chair with a ceramic pot concealed beneath its seat. Yet this delicate piece of furniture hid a truth more brutal than any common privy. Each time the Queen required relief, a trusted nobleman, her groom of the stool, would attend to the close stool with bowed reverence, emptying and cleaning the vessel by hand. The position, though grotesque in duty, conferred immense influence. Only those in the sovereign's closest confidence could qualify for such an intimate task. But this was merely the apex of an urinate and defecate hierarchy in an age without plumbing. Throughout every chamber and corridor, courtiers and servants relied on chamber pots, small basins placed under beds or beneath tables. At appointed hours, these pots were carried to hidden trapdoors in the floorboards and dumped into stagnant cesspits below. These pits, labyrinthine and foul, lay just beneath the palace's opulent surfaces. At night, gong farmers, so named for their tolling warning bell, crept into the damp undercroft, gathering human excrement in wooden buckets. They navigated pitch-black tunnels, crawling with insects and suffocating with putrid air, hauling each load through narrow passages that ran beneath the very halls where the Queen feasted and received ambassadors. The stench rose in invisible waves, penetrating the finest brocades and streaming into the sumptuous banquet halls. In desperate attempts to mask the odour, palace staff burned handfuls of lavender, rosemary, and sweet marjoram in braziers. Fragrant rushes, woven grass, and herbs were strewn upon the floors to serve as makeshift carpets. Yet these fragrant carpets, worn for months without replacement, became layered with hair, spilled wine, crumbs of stale bread, and the unseen effluence of countless trips to the closed stool. As the odour grew unbearable, Elizabeth resorted to a most extraordinary tactic. She moved her court from one palace to another, packing hundreds of attendants, musicians, and nobles into a caravan of coaches and horses. The Great Migration was less a royal progress and more a flight from filth. Each relocation required meticulous planning. Food stores had to be packed in sealed barrels, fresh rushes brought in wagons, and new braziers of herbs ready to burn at every corridor's entrance. Guards flanked each procession to discourage curious onlookers, while pages scattered herbs along the way. This perpetual exodus transformed the Tudor court into a mobile palace, gliding across the English countryside to escape its own waste. Some whispered that these endless journeys served another purpose, avoiding outbreaks of disease believed to breed in the open cesspits. Yet the primary motive remained: to evade the ever-present miasma of human excretion. A weary musician, recounting a journey to Richmond Palace, described the chattering of stately coaches, and the throbbing wheels crushing rushes into a foul-smelling pulp, one that clung to horses' hooves and hitching posts for days. The Queen's strategy had an unintended political side effect. Local lords, summoned to welcome her, found their own manners overwhelmed by sudden court arrivals and the accompanying stench. They laboured to prepare fresh carpets and haul in fragrant flowers, only to watch the palace move on before their efforts bore fruit. This constant relocation kept the nobility off balance, reinforcing Elizabeth's dominance by ensuring that no one settled comfortably enough to plot against her. At dawn, as the court arrived at a new residence, the palace would lie silent, its corridors still rife with the last echoes of excrement being removed. Servants rushed to unbar windows, dragging in cool morning air to dispel the lingering foetor. Musicians played lilting ballads that drifted through empty halls, a gentle lullaby for the freshly arrived court. Elizabeth, arrayed in her finest silks and perfumed to a fault, emerged onto a dais to greet assembled dignitaries, her visage unmarred by the unseen horrors below. Yet beneath that powdered grace lay an empire built on waste. Every throne was perched above a cesspit. Every banquet table stood over corridors where gong farmers toiled in darkness. The golden age of England, celebrated for its poetry and naval triumphs, stood atop a foundation of human excretion and royal aversion to its own refuse. As the candles gutter and your eyelids grow heavy, let this image drift into your dreams. A queen moving like a ghost towards a new palace, her train of perfumed courtiers parting before her, while unseen workers toil below to banish the stench of the human body. This is shocking hygiene secret number 5, the throne of filth upon which Elizabeth's reign was built. Rest now, for the final curtain is drawn on her horrifying secrets, and only silence remains. Thus you have journeyed with me through the most horrifying 5 hygiene secrets of Queen Elizabeth I. From the sugar addiction that destroyed her smile, to the fear of water that kept her from bathing, to the lethal lead mask, the atrocious stench, and the throne piled high with human waste. Yet countless more terrifying details lie hidden deep within the palace and Tudor court customs that we have yet to uncover. Next, let us take 5 more steps, and then 5 more, to fully reveal the 10 shocking hygiene habits of Elizabeth I, secrets never recorded in the history books, promising to chill you far more than any tale before. Shocking hygiene secret number 6. Using urine as a whitening agent. Imagine, in the still pre-dawn hush of a Tudor household, the Queen's linen drawers creaking open one by one. In that gentle half-light, courtiers would behold a surprising sight: vessels filled with urine. For Queen Elizabeth I, this was no scandalous waste, but rather a prized bleaching potion. In her mind, and in the minds of many in her court, diluted urine possessed the power to strip stains from the finest fabrics and even to brighten the Queen's ivory teeth. In those days, the realm's brightest textiles, silks, satins and velvets, often carried stubborn blemishes from spilled wine or candle soot. Ordinary detergents were scarce, and the best soap came in small supply. The common belief held that ammonia, released as urine aged, would act as a natural bleach and disinfectant. Thus, each morning before the sun had fully risen, attendants collected the Queen's own urine in alabaster jugs. This precious liquid would sit overnight, sometimes mixed with sprigs of rosemary, lavender, or other aromatic herbs, allowing the water to clear and the ammonia to strengthen. Meanwhile, small trays of fabric handkerchiefs, collars, and shifts were submerged in large wooden vats along the palace wall. The yellowed linen, once so crisp and spotless, would be laid flat and gently turned over in the pungent solution. Courtiers whispered that, by midday, the cloth emerged a shade lighter, as if the palace itself breathed out a sigh of relief at the restored purity. Yet the scent told another story, a sharp, tangy odour that clung to every fold, requiring hours of hanging in a breeze to hush its sting. But the queen's use of urine did not end with her garments. In a ritual both intimate and bizarre, she believed that rinsing her mouth with the same solution would harden her enamel and cure gum disease. Each evening, after the pomp of court had ended and the last musician's lute had fallen silent, Elizabeth would sip a small cup of diluted urine. She swished it gently between her teeth, confident that the ammonia would dissolve plaque and leave her smile dazzling. In truth, this practice likely irritated her soft tissues, inflaming her gums and strengthening the very bacteria she sought to banish. Over time, the consequences became evident. Where once the queen's breath had been perfumed with rosewater, now courtiers noted a faint ammonia tang whenever she spoke in private chambers. Servants, tasked with collecting and transporting the urine-soaked fabrics, complained of headaches and skin rashes. Faint pink blisters appeared on their hands, and some whispered that persistent use of the solution had eroded their nails and left their palms raw. Textiles, too, suffered. Threads weakened by repeated bleaching would fray and tear, forcing the royal seamstresses to replace expensive cloth sooner than expected. Reactions varied across the court. Some noble women, eager to emulate the queen's methods, dared to try the bleach in their own households, only to find their silks discoloured and their cheeks flushed from inadvertent splashes. Others recoiled in disgust, insisting that true whiteness belonged only to bodies washed in clean water and laundered with proper soap. In hushed corridors, one might hear a heated debate. Was the queen's practice a mark of ingenuity or madness? Yet no one dared openly challenge Elizabeth's authority, and so the ritual persisted in shadowy alcoves and private laundry rooms. From a cultural perspective, this odd custom served as another demonstration of the queen's absolute power and her detachment from common life. To rely on urine instead of imported soap or local spring water marked her as both resourceful and unafraid of what others might call base or ignoble. It underscored a recurring theme in her reign, a willingness to embrace extremes for the sake of image and control. By transforming bodily waste into a bleaching agent, Elizabeth turned a universal human function into a symbol of her authority over nature itself. So as the embers of the hearth glow softly and the hush of night deepens, let your mind drift around this curious ritual the queen's urine transformed into a royal bleach. Take comfort in the knowledge that even the most disturbing practices can yield unexpected insights into human ingenuity and the lengths to which one might go for the sake of perceived purity. Rest now, for the next secret will reveal yet another facet of Tudor extremity, waiting to lull you into a deeper slumber. Shocking hygiene secret number 7. Rubbing spoiled animal fat on the skin. Imagine drifting off to sleep in the hush of a Tudor night, the air thick with lavender and candle smoke. Yet beneath the opulence of silks and velvets lay a practice so revolting it defies belief. Queen Elizabeth I, convinced of its benefits, rubbed rancid animal fat onto her skin each morning. This was no luxury spa treatment, but a moisturizer that reeked of decay and bred its own horrors. The origins of this grim ritual trace back to whispered legends among court physicians. They claimed that fat from pigs or cattle, left to ferment in wooden barrels for weeks, would become a potent salve. In its rotten state, the fat supposedly released enzymes and acids believed to cleanse pores and preserve youthful suppleness. Elizabeth, ever eager to maintain her legendary beauty, embraced this unholy concoction without hesitation. Each dawn, as the first pale rays filtered past her velvet curtains, Elizabeth's personal attendants would retrieve earthenware pots of spoiled fat from the cold storage beneath the palace. The fat, mottled with greenish veins and emitting a sour tang, was warmed slightly over a gentle flame until it just softened. Then, in near darkness, a lady-in-waiting would scoop handfuls of the sludgy paste and gently massage it into the queen's limbs, torso, and face, careful to avoid her powdered mask. This grease, once applied, clung to the skin like a second membrane. As Elizabeth moved through her day, the rancid aroma mixed with her perfumes, creating an uneasy undercurrent beneath the rosewater and musk. Courtiers noted that after an hour, the queen's arms and neck glistened with an oil that shimmered unnaturally, as though her flesh were perpetually moist. However, beneath that sheen lay creeping damage. The acid by-products of decay irritated her skin, causing tiny red bumps and inflamed patches. Over time, the consequences grew undeniable. Small pustules formed where the fat sat longest behind the knees, at the bend of the elbows, and along the jawline. Elizabeth's own attendants, assigned to scrub the residue from her linens each day, reported itching and burning on their hands, despite wearing gloves. Some developed blisters and persistent rashes that took months to heal, testimony to the fat's corrosive nature. In the privacy of court chambers, reactions varied wildly. Some noble women, ever in competition with one another to emulate the queen's splendor, dared to adopt the rancid fat regime. They returned from their daily treatments with flushed cheeks and grim expressions, only to find angry marks marring their skin. Others recoiled in horror, insisting that nothing but cold water and vinegar could ever justify such a method. Heated debates erupted in hushed corners. Was this practice a stroke of royal ingenuity, or a descent into madness? Yet no voice could openly defy the queen's preference, and so the rancid fat continued its reign in secret. From a psychological standpoint, this ritual embodied a profound paradox: the pursuit of beauty through the very substance of death. The queen's willingness to anoint herself with spoiling animal remains spoke to an era in which extremes were embraced for the sake of image and power. It conveyed a message to her subjects. Elizabeth would transcend natural limitations, even if it meant courting decay. In court circles, this only deepened her mystique. She was both goddess and experimenter, defying the human condition. Culturally, the use of rancid animal fat underscored the stark divide between monarch and commoner. Peasants feared spoiled lard for its foulness, yet the queen turned that fear into a symbol of status. By commanding her attendants to handle the rancid substance, Elizabeth asserted her authority over life's most basic realities, bending even the humblest byproduct of sustenance to her will. As dusk approached and the final candle guttered, picture the scene. Elizabeth, her skin still shining from that morning's greasy massage, stepping into a room filled with ambassadors and dignitaries. They bowed, inhaling the heady mix of decay and fragrance, unsure whether to admire her radiance or recoil from the hidden rot. She smiled, unwavering, knowing that her beauty came at a cost no one else would fully comprehend. And now, as you sink deeper into slumber, let the memory of this grisly salve linger only as a distant whisper, a testament to the darkest lengths to which royalty once went in the name of vanity. Rest peacefully, for in the quiet darkness you have uncovered shocking hygiene secret number 7, and tomorrow a new revelation awaits your dreaming mind. Shocking hygiene. Secret number 8. Reusing the close stool without washing. Drift now into a dim, candlelit corner of the palace, where the hush of night is broken only by distant footsteps and the muted rustle of silk gowns. In this quiet realm, hidden far from the glittering banquet halls, lies a practice so unthinkable that even the most hardened courtier would recoil. Queen Elizabeth I reused her close stool repeatedly without washing it. The close stool, you see, was no simple chamber pot. It was an ornate wooden chair carved with graceful scrollwork and cushioned in velvet designed to accommodate the queen in absolute privacy. A ceramic pot nestled beneath its seat, invisible to all but her most trusted attendants. By day, it stood as an unassuming piece of furniture. By night, it became the repository of the queen's most private waste. In Elena's court, the household staff believed that cleaning the close stool too frequently risked angering the sovereign and exposing her to foul air. Besides, with the queen's dread of water and the elaborate difficulty of preparing a proper bath, soap and washing were considered dangerous indulgences. And so, the throne of porcelain sat in its secret chamber for days on end, sometimes weeks, its contents undisturbed, fermenting in silence. Each dawn, as the soft glow of morning light crept through the high windows, an attendant would approach the close stool with a mixture of reverence and dread. With gloved hands and trembling resolve, she would lift the throne's lid just enough for the queen's next use. No emptying, no rinsing, only a discreet wipe of the rim with a linen cloth that itself bore the relics of previous uses. The ceramic remained stained, the air thick with ammonia and decay, clinging to every crevice. As Elizabeth confidentially employed her battering throne, the fumes rose like an unseen spectre. She inhaled oxygen tainted by her own waste, convinced that the ritual preserved her delicate constitution. Yet the absence of washing meant that vile bacteria multiplied unchecked, turning the stool into a breeding ground for disease. Attendants who dared to spy reported a sickly green tinge to the water at the bottom of the pot, and a haze of noxious vapours that clawed at the throat. Over time, the health consequences became impossible to ignore. Servants assigned to move the close stool, when the Queen relocated, complained of chronic nausea, persistent coughs, and rashes on their exposed wrists. Some fell ill with fevers that lingered for days, requiring the care of royal physicians who could do little beyond prescribing a dose of vinegar and a prayer. The once mighty chamber pot had transformed into an incubator of sickness, yet remained uncleaned by design. In hushed corners of the palace, whispers flew like flighty sparrows. "Have you heard?" one lady-in-waiting would murmur, pulling her cloak tighter. "They say the Queen's throne is never emptied." Another would reply, "It is said that a single glance into the pot's depths can steal your appetite and perhaps your life." But no one dared to voice their fears aloud. To question the sovereign's custom was to court disgrace, or worse, exile from the court's favour. Politically, this grotesque habit served a dark purpose. By refusing to allow cleansing of her own waste, Elizabeth projected an image of unassailable resilience. She alone could endure what others found unbearable. Her courtiers, forced to confront the stench each time they served her, were reminded of their subservience. They knew that proximity to her put them at risk, yet they obeyed without question, for the crown's power outweighed any fear of disease. Culturally, the perpetual reuse of the close stool underscored a fundamental divide between monarch and commoner. While peasants toiled by the village well to keep their chamber pots clean, the Queen elevated her own defilement to a ritual of sovereignty. It became more than mere frugality or fear of water. It became a chilling testament to her mastery over life's most basic functions. She ruled not only through law and ceremony, but through the very air that courtiers breathed when they knelt before her. Picture now the final moments of this nightly ordeal. The attendant, heart-pounding, lifts the lid once more, exposes the foul contents, and stands guard until the Queen has finished. Then, as if by practiced choreography, she gently replaces the lid, drapes a scented cloth over the chair's back, and slips away into the dim corridor. The chamber returns to silence, but the lingering odour remains a quiet reminder that beneath the polished marble and flickering torches, a throne of filth endures. And as your eyelids grow heavy, let your thoughts settle on this singular horror, a queen who would rather surround herself with her own disease than grant her chamber pot a single cleansing. This is Shocking Hygiene Secret Number 8, a lesson in the perilous extremes of royal hygiene. Rest now, for the night wanes, and another secret awaits to creep into your dreams. Shocking Hygiene Secret Number 9, washing the face with pond water. Imagine drifting into a twilight haze, the soft glow of candle flames dancing on stone walls, as Queen Elizabeth I begins her morning ritual. In the hush of dawn, long before the court awakens, she reaches not for rose water or perfumed vinegar, but for a battered copper bowl filled with still, murky water drawn from a stagnant pond. This was no error in fortune. It was a deliberate choice born of necessity and superstition. In an age when clean spring water was scarce in the heart of the palace, the courtiers whispered that Elizabeth had grown wary of any liquid deemed too pure. She believed that pristine water carried unseen spirits, or airborne miasma's poisonous vapours, thought to spread plague. Instead, she turned to water that had lain undisturbed, dark, algae-tinted, mixed with fallen leaves and crawling insects, yet strangely comforting in its familiarity. The process was astonishingly elaborate. Each night, before the Queen's chambers were secured, a page would brave the misty moat to scoop water from its furthest edge. He carried the bowl back on a silver tray, careful not to slosh a single drop. Attendants lined the corridor, noses pressed to their kerchiefs, as he presented the bowl before the Queen's appointed dressing table. There, in the dim glow of a single lantern, the water's surface shimmered with floating detritus. tiny bits of moss, a few motionless tadpoles, and the occasional glint of submerged twigs. Elizabeth would raise the bowl with delicate hands, her fingertips brushing the rim as though testing for hidden dangers. Then, with a languid grace, she dipped a linen cloth into the murky pool and began to wipe her cheeks, forehead, and neck. There was no lather, no soap, no fragrant bubbles, only the cold, unsettling touch of pond water against her bare skin. The cloth absorbed a scent of earth and decay, releasing tiny tendrils of musty odor as it passed over her powdered face. The effect on her complexion was immediate and unpredictable. In some areas, the water's impurities caused her skin to glow with a translucent sheen, as if imbued with the very essence of the marshland. In other spots, tiny red bumps would rise along her temples, a reminder that the pond was teeming with bacteria. Courtiers who caught sight of her emerging from this ritual noted the strange mix of clarity and confusion in her gaze, as though she were both refreshed and unsettled by the ordeal. Over time, the consequences became undeniable. The pond's microorganisms thrived in the warmth of the palace chambers, leading to persistent irritation around her eyes and jawline. Crusty scabs formed where the water's fungi had found tender skin to colonize. Her personal physicians, educated in continental practices, attempted to dissuade her by offering distilled rosewater shipped from France. But Elizabeth, ever proud and distrustful of foreign remedies, refused to abandon her chosen source. In hushed whispers, the ladies of the court debated her wisdom. Some admired her courage in embracing the raw power of nature, believing that the pond water contained healing properties beyond the understanding of conventional medicine. Others recoiled at the thought that their queen would willingly scrub her royal visage with a brew of swamp and carrion. Yet none dared speak against her practice openly. To do so risked the queen's displeasure, which could mean banishment from favor or worse. Culturally, this ritual underscored the divide between ruler and subject. While commoners relied on well water or rain collected in barrels, the queen elevated the humblest of sources to an act of sovereignty. She transformed the muddy moat into a symbol of her unbreakable bond with the land she governed, as though the waters of England itself flowed through her veins. By choosing the pond over the spring, she proclaimed that her authority transcended all fears, even the fear of death carried on invisible airs. As you sink deeper into the embrace of sleep, picture this final image. Elizabeth, silhouette framed by candlelight, her skin glistening with droplets of dark water, serene yet uncanny. The bowl rests empty at her side, its surface now a mirror for the flickering flame. The murky liquid has done its work, leaving her both purified and imperiled by its unseen life. And so concludes shocking hygiene secret number 9, the story of a queen who dared to wash her face in water that most would flee. Let this vision drift like a gentle current through your dreams, carrying you toward the final secret, where the line between ritual and ruin blurs even further. Shocking hygiene secret number 10. Dyeing hair with animal blood. Picture yourself drifting through the hushed corridors of a vast Tudor palace, the torches flickering on ancient stone, as Queen Elizabeth I prepares for another day of rigorous courtly display. Among her most unusual practices was a ritual so macabre, it rivals even the darkest legends. She dyed her hair with animal blood. The origins of this grisly custom are shrouded in rumour and half-whispered tales. Some say it began when royal physicians discovered that blood from certain beasts held a deep red hue, unmatched by any pigment of the day. They claimed the iron-rich liquid, when properly treated, would bind to hair fibres and produce a vibrant, lasting colour. Elizabeth, ever seeking to preserve her youthful appearance, embraced the formula enthusiastically. Each week, a specialized retinue comprising trusted grooms, butchers, and a handful of court alchemists ventured to the palace stables and nearby butcher stalls. They procured fresh blood from horses or cattle, sometimes even from deer hunted on royal grounds. The liquid was strained through fine linens to remove clots, then simmered over low embers in a brass cauldron. As the water evaporated, the blood thickened into a syrupy concentrate, dark as midnight wine. In a private chamber, lit by a single lantern's glow, Elizabeth sat draped in linen to shield her silks. An attendant heated the blood concentrate until it steamed gently and glowed with a crimson sheen. With slow, deliberate strokes, she applied the warm dye to the queen's hair, section by section. Where her natural locks had thinned, the dye soaked into a wig of fine horsehair, hitches of bright crimson standing in stark contrast to pale ivory skin. At first, the effect was breathtaking. Elizabeth's hair appeared as a flaming halo, redder than any rose, capturing the light with an otherworldly brilliance. In the cheers of her courtiers, she must have seemed an almost divine presence, a ruler whose image outshone all rivals. But beneath that radiant surface lay a growing horror. Animal blood, rich in proteins and fats, proved the perfect breeding ground for bacteria. Within hours, the queen's scalp itched and burned as invisible colonies took hold. Tiny pustules formed along her hairline, each one oozing a foul fluid that mingled with the dark dye. The odor, part coppery iron, part rank decay, permeated the air around her. Attendants, struggling to maintain decorum, found themselves stepping back, noses pressed against lace kerchiefs, as the palace-scented candles struggled to mask the stench. Over time, Elizabeth's once lustrous locks began to thin even more rapidly. The harsh proteins in the blood weakened the fragile follicles, causing clumps of hair to fall out during each nightly brushing. In desperation, she ordered even more frequent applications, hoping each new tint would restore what the last had stolen. Instead, she caught herself, or rather, her attendants, a constant cycle of dyeing and shedding. Reactions in the royal court ranged from awestruck admiration to hushed revulsion. Noblewomen, ever eager to follow the queen's lead, fluttered their own newly reddened tresses at banquets and balls, only to discover that their shimmering locks carried the same malevolent miasma. Physicians trained in foreign courts warned that Elizabeth's ritual threatened not only infection but systemic poisoning through the scalp's open sores. Yet to refuse the queen's directive was unthinkable. The price of disobedience could be ruin or exile. Culturally, the practice underscored a chilling truth about power and beauty in Tudor England. Elizabeth's use of animal blood as dye proclaimed her dominion over life's most intimate processes, even the shedding of blood itself. To dye one's hair with another creature's lifeblood was to assert a godlike mastery, as though her image drew vitality from the beasts of her realm. It became a spectacle. Ambassadors whispered of the Queen's scarlet crown, a symbol of sovereignty that glowed against the cold stone and velvet tapestries. As the final embers died in the back of the cauldron, picture Elizabeth rising from her seat, hair drenched in the last reddened drops. She fastened a jewelled circlet above her forehead, masking the tender sores that blinked beneath the crusted dye. With a serene nod, she stepped into the daylight, her gait confident, her presence commanding. Courtiers fell silent, hearts pounding at the sight of their monarch enthroned in crimsons brighter than any battlefield banner. And now, as your eyelids flutter and the hush of night deepens, allow this vision to settle, like a slow drifting feather. A queen with hair dyed in animal blood, both radiant and repulsive, commanding awe and dread in equal measure. You have beheld shocking hygiene secret number 10, the final revelation in a series of dark extremes. Rest, dear dreamer, and let the echoes of crimson fade into gentle slumber. Shocking hygiene secret number 11. Eye makeup with bone powder. In the soft glow of a lonely candle, as the Tudor palace settles into hushed shadows, Queen Elizabeth I prepared for another day of courtly ceremony. Yet before her velvet drapes fully opened to greet the dawn, she confronted a ritual both uncanny and unsettling. She painted her eyes with powder made from animal bones. The practice began with a morbid discovery among court apothecaries that finely ground bone could yield a subtle shimmer on the eyelids, an effect unlike any mineral pigment of the age. They claimed the calcium-rich dust would reflect light, lending the queen a spectral glow that heightened the allure of her gaze. Elizabeth, ever in pursuit of features that transcended mere beauty, embraced this bone-based cosmetic with resolute curiosity. Each week, a discreet detachment of royal servants retrieved bones from the palace's kitchen, refuse mostly cattle knuckles and poultry clavicles. These fragments were meticulously cleaned, boiled in scented vinegar to remove flesh, then dried in stone ovens until brittle. In a dim back chamber, alchemists ground the bones into the finest possible powder, sifting repeatedly until the dust took on an almost luminescent quality. The pale fragments glimmered like crushed pearls in a bronze mortar. At dawn, a solitary lady-in-waiting would present Elizabeth with a small silver box of the bone powder. The queen, seated before her gilded mirror, though she dared not gaze directly, would dip a sable-bristled brush into the iridescent dust. With almost imperceptible movements, she swept the powder across her eyelids, up toward her brow bone. The strokes were light, deliberate, as though she were tracing the arc of the sun itself. At first, the effect was mesmerizing. Elizabeth's eyes appeared larger, framed by a soft, opalescent shimmer that seemed to flicker with every breath. Courtiers who witnessed the display later described her gaze as enchanted, as though she peered from beyond the veil of mortality. Yet beneath the radiance lurked a darker truth. Bone powder was riddled with microscopic splinters and organic residues, harboring bacteria that preyed on tender skin. Within hours, the queen's eyelids grew tender. Tiny red bumps sprouted at the corners of her eyes, and a faint itch drove her to blink repeatedly. The powder's rough texture eroded the delicate lining of her eyelashes, leaving them sparse and fragile. Attendants charged with wiping stray dust from her cheeks found that even a gentle touch released invisible shards, causing pink lines to mark her skin. Over time, the consequences became undeniable. Elizabeth developed recurrent eye infections, swelling, redness, and discharge that required the ministrations of royal physicians. They prescribed poultices of rose petals and mild vinegar washes, but the treatments only provided temporary relief. Night after night, she returned to the bone powder, drawn by its promise of ethereal beauty, even as she risked permanent damage to her vision. In the hush of the palace corridors, whispers spread among the ladies of the court. Some dared to adopt the practice, trading their customary coal for the ghostly bone dust, only to find their eyes watering and their vision blurred. Others recoiled in horror, convinced that the Queen's vanity had crossed a line from which there was no return. Yet no one could confront Elizabeth directly. To question her ritual was to challenge her sovereignty. From a cultural perspective, the bone powder underscored the stark divide between ruler and subject. Peasants and commoners relied on charcoals and crushed flowers for their meagre cosmetics. But the Queen elevated the bones of the meat she consumed into a symbol of transcendence over the flesh itself. By painting her eyes with the remnants of death, she proclaimed a mastery of life's cycle, transforming decay into dazzling allure. As you drift further into slumber, picture the final moments of this eerie beauty rite. Elizabeth, her lids dusted in gleaming white, closes her eyes for a moment of stillness. A faint glimmer lingers on her eyelashes like dew at dawn. Then, as the candle flame wavers, the bone powder settles into the creases of her skin, leaving behind a memory of radiance tinged with sorrow. And so we conclude Shocking Hygiene Secret Number 11, the tale of a queen who gazed upon her realm with eyes painted from animal bones, an image at once enchanting and unsettling. Let this vision fade softly into your dreams, leaving only a whisper of illumination in the darkness. Shocking Hygiene Secret Number 12. Reusing sweat pads. Picture the moonlight filtering through a narrow window, casting silver slashes across polished oak floors, as Queen Elizabeth I begins her day. Beneath layers of sumptuous gowns, she carried a most peculiar accessory, small, square cloths designed to catch her perspiration sweat pads, and she reused them without washing. In the stifling confines of heavy silk and brocade, Elizabeth's body would generate warmth and moisture. To protect her fine garments from salt-stained patches, her attendants placed soft linen squares beneath her arms and at the small of her back. Each pad was carefully pinned in place, its fibers ready to absorb the first bead of sweat. Yet when the Queen's daily engagements ended, those same pads were not laundered. Instead, they were pressed between layers of scented paper and tucked away in a mahogany chest, presumed to air dry until needed again. Over days and sometimes weeks, the cloths hosted a thriving community of bacteria, spores, and odor compounds. Each time Elizabeth donned a fresh gown, she also embraced the unseen life forming in those reused pads. At dawn, one attendant would retrieve the topmost bundle of paper-wrapped squares. The faint rustle of parchment heralded a moment both intimate and unsettling. The Queen, reclining on her velvet chaise, would extend her arm, and the officer of her wardrobe would discreetly swap the soiled cloth for the next fresh one. No water was involved, only the gentle unfolding of heirloom linen, still carrying the musk of the previous day's heat and work. As Elizabeth moved through her morning ritual reading dispatches, greeting ambassadors, inspecting petitions, the pads beneath her arms clung damply to her skin once more. The sticky moisture mixed with the warmth of her flesh, releasing a faint but persistent sourness. Courtiers, stationed at a polite distance, sensed the hint of musk rising from her robes, a reminder that beneath impeccable gowns lay a body in constant, unwashed flux. Over time, the consequences rippled outward. Attendants tasked with folding and rewrapping, the pads found their fingers chafed raw by the stubborn fibers and lingering dampness. Some fell ill with skin irritations, red welts blossoming where the reused linen had pressed too closely. Others suffered mild fevers and fatigue, rumoured to stem from exposure to the miasma rising from those compacted squares of cloth. Within the private alcoves of the palace, whispers flitted from one noblewoman to another. They say the queen's sweat pads are never cleaned. A hush would follow, as though confessing to a collective shame. Yet none dared press the matter. To question Elizabeth's custom was akin to questioning her right to govern, and so the ritual persisted, cloaked in silence and scent. Culturally, the reuse of sweat pads revealed a stark assertion of royal prerogative. While common folk might change shifts daily, rinse garments in running streams, or sun-dry linens on open racks, the Queen elevated her own discomfort to a demonstration of sovereignty. By embracing the unwashed, she showed that she transcended ordinary needs. The pads, once symbols of modesty, became talismans of her unyielding will. Imagine now the scene at night's end. Elizabeth retires to her private chamber, warm from the day's exertions. An attendant removes the sweat pad, gently folding it into scented paper once more. The Queen inhales the fading whisper of musk and closes her eyes, her breathing slow and steady. The pad, stained yet cherished, slips into the chest, waiting to embrace her warmth again. As your own eyelids grow heavy and the hush of midnight settles around you, let the image of those reused linen squares drift into your thoughts. Each soft fold holds a story of power, defiance, and the strange lengths to which one might go for the sake of image. You have glimpsed shocking Hygiene secret number 12, a testament to the Tudor extremes of vanity and neglect. Rest now, and let this quiet revelation lull you deeper into slumber. Shocking Hygiene, secret number 13, neutralizing odors with animal manure ash. Imagine the hush of a vast Tudor hall at midnight, torchlight flickering against stone walls, as Queen Elizabeth I confronts yet another assault on her senses. In this quiet expanse, she employed a method so peculiar that it might cause even modern noses to wrinkle in disbelief. She burned animal manure to ash and scattered it throughout her chambers to mask foul odors. The origins of this unusual practice lay in crude but earnest experimentation by her court's apothecaries. They believed that the alkaline ash, produced by burning horse or poultry droppings, could neutralize the acidic stench of human waste and stagnant air. By converting solid excrement into powdery ash, they hoped to create a barrier, an absorbing carpet of sorts, that would trap offending molecules and protect the Queen's delicate nostrils. Each fortnight, a small troop of stable hands and coop tenders gathered fresh manure from the palace's horses and poultry yard. Under the cover of darkness, they shoveled the droppings into iron braziers stationed in a remote courtyard. When the piles crackled and hissed, they heaped on twigs and fragrant sprigs of juniper and rosemary, both to fuel the flames and to impart a sweeter note to the resulting smoke. The fire burned down to glowing embers, then to fine white ash. At dawn, the ash was carefully raked into wooden trays and carried down winding corridors to the Queen's apartments. An attendant, moving as if in a ritual dance, sprinkled the ash along the edges of hearths, across the thresholds of doorways, and even in the corners of the great four-poster bed. The powder formed a pale border, like dew frozen in time, waiting to absorb the lurking stench of human habitation. At first, the effect was almost miraculous. Visitors entering the Queen's chamber noted a faint earthy tang like the forest floor after rain. The heavy aroma of stale chamber pots and drenched brocade seemed to recede, replaced by a ghostly whisper of ash and herbs. Courtiers, who had grown numb to the ever-present miasma of unwashed linen and crowded humanity, felt relief as though stepping from a swamp into crisp morning air. Yet the illusion did not last. By the end of the first day, the ash had darkened to a muddy grey, saturated with the invisible remnants of sweat, spilled wine, and chamber pot overflow. The very powder meant to neutralize odors absorbed them instead, becoming a toxic blanket. At night, the trays released a faint but persistent dust, coloured by the fumes of fermenting waste, clinging to the Queen's shoes and perfumed gowns. Health consequences quickly emerged. Courtiers who slept near the edges of the powder trails awoke with irritated throats and burning eyes, victims of fine ash particles stirred by midnight drafts. Some developed persistent coughs, blamed on the inhalation of both ash and residual ammonia. The Queen's personal physician recorded cases of mild respiratory distress among her attendants, though none dared speak of confronting the Queen's directive. Within the palace's narrower passages, reactions varied from reluctant acceptance to outright horror. Some servants prized their proximity to the Queen above comfort, braving the ash-laden floors to light her candles or adjust her cushions. Others avoided the perimeter paths, choosing to walk on polished tiles farther from her presence, where the ash did not cling so readily. Whispers fluttered like moths. "They say the Queen's chambers lay upon a carpet of excrement ash," one maid would say. Another would respond, "Better a silken rug than this powder that clings to one's breath." Culturally, this practice highlighted the extremes of Tudor court life. Commoners might burn peat or straw to mask kitchen odours, but Elizabeth elevated waste ash into a symbol of dominion over both nature and decay. She declared by silent decree that even the filth of her stables could be harnessed to her benefit, transforming the lowest byproduct of her realm into a shield against insult. In her hands, ash became a talisman of power, an unspoken reminder that her authority extended even into the unseen corners of her own chambers. As candle wicks gutter in the silence of your slumber, imagine those pale borders of ash, once fresh and white, now streaked with the hidden history of courtly life. Hear the faint rasp as a chambermaid steps delicately over the powder, straining to breathe without coughing. Visualize the Queen herself, reclining upon her dais, undisturbed, a faint halo of herbal smoke lingering around her. Allow this final vision of excrement transformed into ash, and ash scattered like sacred dust to drift you deeper into a restful state. You have witnessed shocking hygiene secret number 13, a testament to the strange and somber rituals of a queen who ruled through any means necessary. Rest now, enveloped in the hush of night, and let the shadows carry you gently toward morning's light. Shocking hygiene secret number 14, sniffing rotting meat for desensitization. As the embers of twilight settle into darkness, imagine Queen Elizabeth I in a secluded corner of her private quarters, preparing for a practice so extraordinary it defies belief. In hushed tones, attendants speak of the Queen's ritual of sniffing rotting meat to desensitize herself to foul odors, a method designed to steel her nerves against the stench that pervaded Tudor life. The notion originated from a peculiar belief among her physicians and alchemists. By confronting the most abhorrent smells head-on, one could train the body and mind to endure the worst that nature could offer. For Elizabeth, whose reign demanded unwavering composure, even in the face of squalor, this nose training seemed a fitting supplement to her other extreme hygiene measures. At the stroke of midnight, a single page would approach the Queen's chamber, carrying a slender pole from which hung strips of meat, beef, or venison long past its prime. The air around these morsels was thick with the aroma of decay, greenish fuzz clinging to the edges, a rank sweetness of fats breaking down, the sour tang of bacterial bloom. By candlelight, Elizabeth would take the pole in her hand, raise the meat to her nostrils, and inhale deeply, as though drawing breath from the heart of a swamp. Each inhalation forced her lungs to encounter the full spectrum of odors, ammonia, sulphurous undertones, and an unmistakable musk of rot. The attendants watched in respectful silence, their own kerchiefs pressed to their faces as they recorded the duration of each inhalation. 10 seconds on the first night, then 15, then 20. Over days, the Queen would extend her exposure, her regal composure tested by the most primal of stimuli. At first, the sensation was nearly unbearable. Elizabeth's shoulders trembled, her lips parted in a slight gasp, and her brows knitted against the assault on her senses. Yet with each repetition, she recovered more swiftly, her breathing steadying against the odorous tide. Courtiers noted that by the end of the week, she could inhale deeply without flinching, her face betraying neither revulsion nor distress. She emerged from the ritual with her composure intact, an unspoken triumph over the very decay that threatened to erode her realm's dignity. But the practice was not without consequence. Prolonged exposure to the bacterial miasma clinging to the meat led to irritated sinuses and persistent sneezing. Elizabeth's private physician complained of his own sniffles and watery eyes as he dutifully prepared the next night's offering. Some attendants developed mild fevers or headaches, symptoms they attributed to the toxic particles wafting from the rotting flesh. Yet none dared petition the queen to cease. The ritual had become a badge of her indomitable will. Within the gilded corridors, the gossip was as pungent as the meat itself. Noble women, curious to emulate their sovereign's toughness, attempted their own nose training, only to find themselves doubled over in gagging fits. Others whispered that the queen's nightly ordeal was akin to a form of self-punishment, a penance for her power, a reminder of mortality even at the height of her glory. Yet Elizabeth would neither confirm nor deny. She simply accepted the meat and inhaled, her eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the walls. Culturally, the use of rotting meat as a tool for mental fortitude underscored Elizabeth's desire to transcend ordinary human frailties. In a court where disease and decay were ever-present threats, she asserted control by becoming impervious to the very stench that could shatter lesser spirits. Her subjects came to view her as a monarch of iron will, one who, by mastering the revolting, demonstrated her right to rule over life's harshest realities. Picture the final moments of this nightly trial. Elizabeth, pale, faced, but unwavering, lowers the meat from her nose. The attendants swiftly remove the pole and carry it away, leaving behind only the lingering odor of decay. The queen inhales fresh air, smooth and cool, as though tasting liberation itself. She straightens her gown, adjusts a jeweled brooch on her breast, and steps into the soft candlelight to greet the approaching dawn. And now, as sleep beckons, let this image drift through your mind. A queen confronting the essence of rot to forge her own resilience, inhaling decay so that she might remain untouched by it. You have witnessed shocking hygiene secret number 14, a testament to the lengths one might go in pursuit of unyielding composure. Rest deeply, and let this final revelation guide you into dreams untainted by the world's harsher breaths. Shocking hygiene secret number 15. Adding lead to tea for digestive comfort. As the dawn light filters softly through heavy velvet drapes, casting muted patterns upon the chamber walls, Queen Elizabeth I awaits her morning tea. Yet this tranquil ritual conceals a startling secret. She dissolved a few drops of lead solution into her tea, believing it would soothe her stomach and ease the strain of royal duties. In an era when medical knowledge was part superstition and part trial, her physicians whispered of lead's supposed virtues as a calmative. They suggested that trace amounts, carefully measured, could relieve indigestion, banish headaches, and still an uneasy mind. Elizabeth, ever eager to maintain her rigorous schedule from presiding in council chambers to reviewing petitions, embraced this elixir without hesitation. Each morning, just before court convened, a royal apothecary would prepare a small vial of lead acetate solution, a clear, syrupy liquid distilled from refined lead and vinegar. The process was clandestine, conducted in a dimly lit alcove behind the Queen's private pantry. In a whispered exchange, the apothecary handed the vial to a lady-in-waiting, who carried it with trembling reverence to the tea table. Queen Elizabeth, seated upon her cushioned stool, raised the porcelain teacup in delicate fingers. The attendant unscrewed the tiny stopper and tipped the vial, letting a few drops of the syrup glide into the pale infusion of black tea. A faint clink of porcelain signaled the union of two seemingly innocuous liquids. The Queen stirred the brew with a silver spoon, watching the amber swirl settle into stillness. At first sip, she felt a subtle warmth bloom in her belly, a gentle comfort that gradually eased tension. Her appetite improved, and she found her mind sharpened for the morning's litany of affairs. In the ornate halls, courtiers noticed that she drank her tea more solemnly than usual, as though savouring an invisible balm. Yet beneath that composed exterior, the lead began its insidious work. Lead acetate, known to the apothecaries as sweet vinegar of Saturn, carried a deceptive sweetness that masked its toxicity. With each cup, microscopic particles seeped into the bloodstream, accumulating in the Queen's organs. Over days, weeks, and months, this subtle poisoning manifested in tremors of the hands and lapses in memory, symptoms gently attributed to the burdens of state. In private, Elizabeth's attendants observed more alarming signs. She sometimes winced after swallowing, a faint pallor creeping across her cheeks. On occasion, a visible tremor ran through her fingers as she signed official documents. Physicians recommended rest and further doses, convinced that the benefits outweighed the risks. They cautioned the Queen never to exceed the prescribed amount, fearful that more than a few drops could prove fatal. Within the palace, reaction to this ritual was mixed. Some members of the court, eager to mirror the Queen's supposed remedies, experimented with lead additions in their own teas, only to suffer headaches and digestive distress. Others recoiled, insisting that any remedy involving metal belonged in the crucible, not the teacup. Yet none dared openly challenge Elizabeth's practice. To question her elixir was to question her rule. From a broader perspective, the addition of lead to tea underscored the gulf between royal privilege and common wisdom. While ordinary folk brewed their morning tea with simple water, carefully drawn and filtered, the Queen's infusion received a secret fortification of metal. It spoke to a belief that power demanded extraordinary measures, even at the cost of life itself. By ingesting a substance known to bring both calm and creeping death, Elizabeth demonstrated that her reign would transcend the limitations of mortal flesh. As the final cup was drained and the last drop of lead washed down the hatchment, imagine the Queen rising to greet her subjects. Her hair pinned back, her elaborate gown rustling softly, she stepped into the glare of torchlight with a measured grace. Courtiers bowed deeply, unaware of the poison that pulsed beneath her calm exterior. And now, as your eyelids grow heavy and the world recedes into the hush of night, let this image settle. A monarch sipping a brew laced with lead, seeking solace in a sip that promised comfort but delivered peril. You have witnessed shocking hygiene secret number 15, a final testament to the extreme and often deadly lengths to which one queen went in pursuit of bodily ease and regal composure. Rest now, and let the quietude of slumber wash away these final whispers of Tudor extremes. As the light of our tale gently fades into a soft evening glow, allow your mind to drift beyond the harsh realities of lead masks, rancid fats, and boiling blood. Imagine that long corridor of Tudor stone dissolving into a gentle mist, each echoing footstep replaced by the quiet whisper of a lullaby. Let the images of powdered faces and shifting palaces melt away like morning dew beneath a warming sun until only a calm hush remains. You have followed Queen Elizabeth through extremes of vanity and endurance, her fearless defiance of natural limits, her willingness to embrace the very things that would destroy her. Yet beyond the shock and the spectacle lies a simple truth. Our bodies are both fragile and resilient. We seek comfort in rituals, however strange, and we cling to illusions of control when the world feels uncertain. In each bizarre remedy, be it a poultice of fermented fat or a draught of lead-laced tea, there echoes our eternal desire to soothe discomfort, to preserve youth, and to assert mastery over fate. But true strength is not found in extremes of neglect or excess. It blossoms in gentle self-care, in acts of kindness toward our own bodies and those around us. The story we have woven tonight serves as a mirror, reflecting how far we might stray when fear and vanity guide our choices. And yet, even in the darkest chapters there is hope, a reminder that compassion, wisdom, and moderation will always outshine the most dazzling illusion of perfection. Now, as your breathing slows and each heartbeat becomes a steady drum beneath the veil of sleep, feel the weight of those heavy gowns fall away. Sense the cool comfort of clean water washing over you, the soft caress of fresh linen against your skin. Let the warmth of simple kindness fill your senses, and allow the gentle promise of rest to embrace you fully. In this moment, the palace fades completely. There is no throne of filth, no chambers of miasma, only the soft sanctuary of your own imagination, where every whisper of wind and distant bird call lulls you closer to slumber. Carry with you the wisdom of this tale, that true beauty and lasting strength are born not of extremes, but of balance, care, and the tender respect we show ourselves each day. And as you drift off into that sweet half-dream where shadows dance and stars hum lullabies, know that you are safe, that your journey ends here in peace. May your dreams be gentle, your rest restorative, and your waking bright with promise. Thank you for sharing this quiet voyage through history's darker corners. If you found solace or wonder in our story, please subscribe to our channel so that together we may explore more fascinating tales, unveiled with care and calm, and that you may join us again under the soft glow of candlelight for adventures that both enlighten and soothe. Good night, dear friend. Sleep well, And until we meet again in the next whispered story, may peace cradle you in its gentle arms.